Jerusalem stands apart from any other city in the world. Known as Yerushalayim in Hebrew and Al-Quds in Arabic, it holds a central place in the spiritual and historical identity of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam alike. Its name alone evokes intense reverence and intense conflict. This sacred city has been at the crossroads of faith and war, hope and devastation, reverence and political strife, especially between Jews and Palestinians, in what many consider the most deeply entrenched territorial dispute in modern history. For Jews, Jerusalem is the holiest of cities, the site where the first and second temples once stood, both destroyed, with only the Western Wall enduring as a sacred remnant. For Christians, it is where the ministry, crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth unfolded, and for Muslims, it is the third holiest city after Mecca and Medina, the site from which the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to the heavens during the Isra and Miraj. In this reimagined journey through time, we explore the pivotal chapters of Jerusalem's extraordinary past, tracing its origins, evolution, and the mysteries that continue to surround it through the lens of archaeological evidence and historical documentation. This narrative does not seek to answer every theological claim, but rather to understand the ancient heartbeat of a city that has outlived empires, prophets, and ideologies. Archaeological interest in Jerusalem dates back to the 19th century, when European explorers and biblical scholars began excavating the city and its surroundings in hopes of verifying scriptural accounts. These early efforts led to discoveries that traced human presence in the area to as far back as the Chalcolithic period, between 4500 and 3400 BCE. During the Middle Bronze Age, between 1800 and 1500 BCE, the city saw fortified settlements and signs of growing urban organization. The region was originally inhabited by a network of Semitic tribes, collectively known as the Canaanites, whose presence is recorded both in archaeological findings and the Book of Genesis. According to Genesis 12, God called upon Abraham to settle in Canaan, a region that would later be associated with divine promise. While evidence from the Canaanite period in Jerusalem is scarce, ancient texts and modest findings confirm that the city was once controlled by the Jebusites, a tribe that inhabited it around 1500 to 1000 BCE. Biblical tradition tells us that King David captured Jerusalem by secretly entering through a water shaft connected to the Gihon Spring, though modern archaeology raises doubts about the plausibility of such an event due to the strategic fortifications surrounding the spring at the time. Still, this blend of scripture and science paints a vivid picture of a city steeped in both legend and lived history. The earliest known foundations of Jerusalem can be traced back to around 3000 BCE, when a small settlement was established near the Gihon Spring. This modest beginning marked the genesis of what would become one of the most historically contested and spiritually significant cities on earth. The earliest known mention of Jerusalem appears in Egyptian records around 2000 BCE under the name Rushalimum, suggesting that it was already recognized as a place of note. By the 10th century BCE, Jerusalem had developed into a fortified Canaanite city with massive defensive walls and a sophisticated water supply system. During the Late Bronze Age, the city became a vassal of the Egyptian Empire, a relationship documented through the Amarna letters, clay tablets containing correspondence between Egyptian rulers and their regional allies. These records reflect the city's geopolitical value long before the rise of the Israelite kingdoms. At this point in history, Jerusalem was not yet a religious epicenter, but rather a strategically located fortress city vying for survival in a landscape dominated by imperial ambitions and tribal rivalries. The city's identity would soon shift drastically with the arrival of figures like David and Solomon, forever altering its trajectory. The people known as the Canaanites played a foundational role in the early history of Jerusalem and the broader region. Canaan itself was a region in the southern Levant populated by various Semitic-speaking groups who, while culturally distinct, shared many customs and religious beliefs. By the late 2nd millennium BCE, Canaan had become a focal point of imperial tension, with Egyptian, Hittite and Mitanni influences intersecting within its borders. The biblical texts often refer to Canaan as the Promised Land, and its inhabitants are described as both nomadic and settled communities. Archaeological discoveries, such as pottery, burial sites and city ruins, paint a picture of a rich and complex society. According to scholars like Mark Smith, there is substantial overlap between Canaanite and early Israelite culture, suggesting that the Israelites did not emerge as a wholly separate people, but rather evolved from within the broader Canaanite milieu. This theory challenges long-standing religious narratives and reinforces the importance of archaeological inquiry. In Jerusalem itself, carved stone tombs dating from 3100 to 2900 BCE offer some of the earliest material evidence of Canaanite presence. These tombs stand as silent witnesses to a time when the city's sacred status was yet to be written in the scrolls of history. By the year 1000 BCE, Jerusalem underwent a dramatic transformation that would elevate its significance in both historical and religious narratives. According to biblical tradition, King David captured the city from the Jebusites and established it as the political and spiritual capital of the United Kingdom of Israel. He chose Jerusalem not only for its defensible position, but also because it lay outside the territories of the 12 tribes, making it a neutral ground to unify his people. The story tells that David's forces entered through a hidden water shaft connected to the Gihon spring, an account that many modern archaeologists dispute due to the spring's known fortifications at the time. Nonetheless, David's conquest marks a turning point in the city's destiny. His son Solomon later constructed the first temple, a permanent sanctuary to house the Ark of the Covenant and centralize worship, solidifying Jerusalem's role as the heart of Jewish religious life. This act also signaled a break from the nomadic tradition of the tabernacle, reflecting a shift toward a settled and institutionalized faith. For the Israelites, Jerusalem became not just a capital, but the symbolic dwelling place of their God. Jerusalem's newfound status did not shield it from turmoil. After Solomon's death, the united monarchy fractured into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, with Jerusalem remaining the capital of Judah. Over the next centuries, Jerusalem faced repeated threats and sieges from powerful empires. Around 701 BCE, the Assyrian king Sennacherib launched a campaign against Judah. According to Assyrian records, King Hezekiah of Judah paid an enormous tribute, including gold, silver, and other valuables, to avoid the complete destruction of the city. Yet the real devastation came later, in 586 BCE, when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II conquered Jerusalem, destroyed Solomon's temple, and deported much of the population to Babylon. This marked one of the most traumatic chapters in Jewish history, remembered as the Babylonian Exile. Despite the catastrophe, hope endured. When the Persian Empire, under Cyrus the Great, defeated the Babylonians in 539 BCE, he permitted the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple. This period of return and reconstruction reaffirmed Jerusalem's centrality in Jewish identity, even amid displacement and destruction. With the return of the exiles and the rebuilding of the temple, Jerusalem entered a new chapter in its long saga. The Second Temple, completed around 516 BCE, stood as a beacon of resilience and faith for the Jewish people. Although less grand than Solomon's original structure, it restored a sense of continuity and spiritual purpose. Over time, the city came under the control of successive empires, first the Persians, then the Greeks following the conquests of Alexander the Great. During the Hellenistic period, Jerusalem's population was divided over the influence of Greek culture. Many Jews resisted the process of Hellenization, which attempted to align Jewish traditions with Greek customs and values. This cultural friction eventually culminated in the Maccabean Revolt, led by a priestly family whose most famous member, Judas Maccabeus, recaptured the city and rededicated the temple in 164 BCE. This victory is still commemorated today in the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. The struggle during this time was not merely about foreign rule, but about preserving identity, faith, and autonomy in the face of imposed assimilation. The Hasmonean dynasty, established after the success of the Maccabean Revolt, ruled an independent Jewish state for nearly a century. However, internal power struggles and external pressures eventually led to its downfall. In 63 BCE, the Roman general Pompey entered Jerusalem, marking the beginning of Roman influence over the region. This influence became dominance with the rise of Herod the Great, a Roman client king known for his architectural ambitions and political cunning. Herod undertook massive reconstruction projects, including the expansion of the Second Temple, transforming it into a magnificent complex that impressed even his critics. He also built fortresses, aqueducts, and the port city of Caesarea Maritima. Despite his grand accomplishments, Herod's rule was marked by paranoia and brutality. After his death, Rome took direct control of Judea through appointed governors, one of whom was Pontius Pilate. It was during this period that Jesus of Nazareth carried out his ministry, was arrested, and crucified, events that would transform Jerusalem into a foundational site for Christianity. The city had now become the spiritual center of two major world religions, with its significance only continuing to grow. The 1st century CE was a time of mounting tension in Jerusalem. Roman occupation became increasingly resented, especially under corrupt and heavy-handed governors. In 66 CE, a full-scale revolt erupted, what is now known as the First Jewish-Roman War. Initially, Jewish rebels saw success, even defeating Roman forces in early battles. However, Rome soon responded with overwhelming might. General Vespasian, and later his son Titus, led a brutal campaign to crush the rebellion. In 70 CE, after a prolonged and devastating siege, Jerusalem fell. The Romans burned the Second Temple to the ground, looted its treasures, and razed much of the city. The only remaining part of the temple complex was a retaining wall, the Western Wall, which endures today as a sacred site in Judaism. The destruction marked a defining trauma in Jewish history, initiating a long period of diaspora and redefining Jewish religious practice in the absence of a temple. Meanwhile, the Roman victory was commemorated with the Arch of Titus in Rome, celebrating not just a military conquest, but the symbolic dismantling of Jewish national identity centered in Jerusalem. In the aftermath of the revolt, the Romans sought to erase Jewish ties to Jerusalem. Emperor Hadrian rebuilt the ruined city around 129 CE, renaming it Aelia Capitolina and banning Jews from entering. A temple to Jupiter was erected on the site where the Second Temple once stood, and Roman military presence was reinforced. These moves ignited another rebellion, the Bar Kokhba Revolt, 132-136 CE, which was violently suppressed, leading to further massacres and expulsions. The city evolved into a minor Roman provincial town with a predominantly pagan character, yet Jerusalem's spiritual significance continued to simmer beneath the surface. With the rise of Christianity in the 4th century, and particularly after Emperor Constantine's conversion, the city regained prominence. His mother, Helena, is said to have journeyed to the Holy Land and identified key Christian sites, including the location of Jesus' tomb. Constantine commissioned the Church of the Holy sepulchre on that site, which soon became the most revered Christian shrine in the city. From this point forward, Jerusalem became a destination for Christian pilgrims, reasserting itself as a sacred hub, not just for Judaism, but for Christianity as well. As Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, Jerusalem emerged as a key spiritual center for the new faith. During the Byzantine period, which followed the division of the Roman Empire, the city underwent a religious and architectural transformation. Christian churches, monasteries, and pilgrim hostels were constructed throughout the city. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre became the heart of Christian devotion in Jerusalem, attracting believers from across the empire. By the 5th century, Jerusalem's population was composed almost entirely of Christians, and Jewish access remained heavily restricted. However, this religious dominance did not ensure peace. In 614 CE, the city fell to the Sasanian Empire of Persia during a brutal campaign in which many Christians were killed, and numerous holy sites, including the Holy Sepulchre, were damaged or destroyed. The Persian occupation was brief, and by 629 CE, the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius retook the city. Yet the city's stability was again short-lived. Just a few years later, Arab Muslim forces advanced toward the Levant, and in 638 CE, Jerusalem surrendered to Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, marking the beginning of Islamic rule in the city. Under early Islamic rule, Jerusalem experienced both continuity and transformation. Muslims revered the city for its connection to the Prophet Muhammad, who, according to Islamic tradition, ascended to heaven from the Temple Mount during the night journey. To commemorate this sacred event, the Umayyad Caliphate constructed the Dome of the Rock in 691 CE, and later the Al-Aqsa Mosque, both of which remain iconic landmarks on the city's skyline. Despite being under Muslim rule, Jerusalem retained a significant Christian presence, and Jewish communities were once again permitted to live within its walls. The city became a symbol of coexistence, albeit under Islamic governance. Yet as Islamic dynasties shifted from the Umayyads to the Abbasids and eventually the Fatimids, Jerusalem's political importance fluctuated. While never attaining the central administrative status of cities like Damascus or Baghdad, Jerusalem continued to hold immense religious and symbolic value. In the 11th century, the city's religious balance began to deteriorate amid renewed tensions, particularly as European interest in the Holy Land intensified. This growing pressure would soon erupt into one of the most violent and transformative episodes in the city's long history, the Crusades. The First Crusade culminated in one of the bloodiest episodes in Jerusalem's history. In July 1099, after a long siege, Crusader forces breached the city's defenses and launched a massacre that claimed the lives of thousands of Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. Streets ran red with blood as the Latin Christians claimed the city in the name of Christendom. Godfrey of Bouillon, one of the Crusades' leaders, was declared defender of the Holy Sepulchre, though he refused the title of king. His brother Baldwin succeeded him, becoming the first official monarch of the newly formed Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Crusaders quickly reconfigured the city's religious landscape, converting Islamic sites like the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque into Christian sanctuaries. Christian institutions flourished under their rule, with the establishment of military orders such as the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, created to protect pilgrims and secure the Christian presence. Jerusalem now operated as the capital of a fragile but fervent Western kingdom in a predominantly Muslim region. While the Crusaders considered their conquest divinely sanctioned, their brutal occupation left a legacy of deep scars and lasting animosities. The Christian hold on, Jerusalem, was relatively brief in the grand scope of its history. In 1187, Muslim forces under the leadership of Saladin launched a campaign to recapture the city. Unlike the violent Crusader conquest decades earlier, Saladin's victory was marked by restraint and strategic diplomacy. After defeating the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin, he entered Jerusalem and allowed its Christian residents to leave peacefully upon payment of a ransom. Islamic rule was re-established, and Muslim worship resumed at the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Jerusalem remained under Ayyubid control, the dynasty founded by Saladin, for several decades before it eventually transitioned to Mamluk rule in the mid-13th century. The Mamluks, a military caste that rose to power in Egypt, maintained a strong architectural and cultural presence in the city. Between the 13th and 15th centuries, they commissioned the construction of madrasas, hospitals and public fountains, many of which still stand today. During this era, Jerusalem became less a battleground and more a religious sanctuary under Islamic stewardship, even as it lost political significance to cities like Cairo and Damascus. In 1517, the Ottoman Empire absorbed Jerusalem into its vast and expanding territory after defeating the Mamluks. Under the reign of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, the city underwent a period of revitalization and urban renewal. Suleiman ordered the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls, which still define the boundaries of the old city today. His administration also prioritized the restoration of key religious sites, including the Dome of the Rock, and the establishment of public infrastructure such as fountains, markets, and religious schools. Notably, the Ottomans maintained a policy of religious tolerance, allowing Muslims, Christians, and Jews to practice their faiths with relative freedom. This coexistence was symbolized by the presence of mosques, churches, and synagogues existing side by side, often on the same streets. Though the city lost its status as a political capital, its spiritual importance remained unshaken. Over the centuries, Jerusalem became increasingly diverse, attracting pilgrims and settlers from across the empire. Despite later economic decline and administrative neglect, the Ottoman period preserved Jerusalem's sacred character while introducing new layers of cultural and architectural identity that endure to this day. By the 19th century, the Ottoman grip on Jerusalem had weakened considerably. As the empire decayed, foreign influence in the city grew. European powers began establishing consulates, religious institutions, and missions, each seeking to expand their cultural and political presence. This was accompanied by a sharp rise in Christian pilgrimages and a resurgence of religious fervor across Europe, driven in part by millenarian beliefs tied to Jerusalem's prophetic role. During this time, Jews from Eastern Europe and the Middle East also began migrating to the city in growing numbers, laying the groundwork for a demographic transformation. By the mid-1800s, Jerusalem had expanded beyond its ancient walls. Jewish communities established the first residential neighborhoods outside the old city, a move that marked the birth of modern Jerusalem. These new districts, such as Mishkanot Sha'ananim, became the blueprint for further development in the western areas of the city. Simultaneously, tensions among religious and ethnic groups intensified as Ottoman authority eroded and competing national interests converged. Though Jerusalem remained a city of faith, it was quickly becoming a political chessboard in the game of empires. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire during World War I ushered in a new era for Jerusalem. In 1917, British forces under General Edmund Allenby captured the city from the Ottomans, marking the beginning of the British mandate over Palestine. Allenby, aware of the city's religious sensitivity, famously entered Jerusalem on foot as a sign of respect. In 1922, the League of Nations formalized British control, tasking the United Kingdom with administering the region and preparing it for eventual self-governance. However, British rule introduced new tensions rather than resolving old ones. As Jewish immigration to the area increased, driven by rising anti-Semitism in Europe and the Zionist movement, Arab opposition grew, resulting in riots and cycles of violence. The city's Population ballooned, with Jews, Muslims, and Christians living in close proximity, but under increasing strain. One of the most shocking episodes during this time was the 1946 bombing of the King David Hotel by the Jewish underground group Irgun, which killed 91 people and symbolized the mounting chaos. Jerusalem was no longer just a religious symbol. It had become the epicenter of a bitter and complex nationalist struggle. In the wake of World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, international attention turned sharply toward the future of Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition the territory into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem designated as an international city under UN administration. The plan was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab states, leading to civil unrest and, eventually, full-scale war. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel declared its independence. The very next day, neighboring Arab nations launched a coordinated military response. The ensuing Arab-Israeli War of 1948 resulted in a divided Jerusalem. West Jerusalem came under Israeli control, while East Jerusalem, including the Old City, was annexed by Jordan. Barbed wire and armed checkpoints split the city in two, with limited access between the sectors. During this period, Jews were barred from visiting their holy sites in the eastern half of the city. Though the fighting ceased, the conflict was far from over. Jerusalem had become the most visible fault line in a growing regional and ideological clash that would persist for generations. The status of Jerusalem shifted once again during the Six-Day War in June 1967. In a rapid and decisive military campaign, Israel captured East Jerusalem from Jordan, effectively bringing the entire city under Israeli control. On June 7th, Israeli paratroopers reached the Western Wall, and for the first time in nearly 2 decades, Jews could once again pray at their most sacred site. The reunification of the city was celebrated by many in Israel as a historic and spiritual triumph. However, for Palestinians and much of the Arab world, it marked the beginning of a prolonged occupation. The Israeli government moved quickly to extend its jurisdiction over East Jerusalem and declared the city its eternal and indivisible capital, a claim that has never been fully recognized by the international community. In the decades that followed, Jerusalem became a focal point for diplomatic tensions, religious controversies, and periodic outbreaks of violence. Despite numerous peace initiatives, the city remains deeply divided, not only geographically, but emotionally and politically. Every stone of its ancient streets carries the weight of competing narratives, and every prayer echoes the unresolved cries of a shared yet fractured history. Today, Jerusalem stands as a city of paradoxes, ancient yet modern, sacred yet contested, united by faith yet divided by politics. Its skyline, a mosaic of minarets, church spires, and synagogues, reflects the profound spiritual importance it holds for billions of people across the globe. Yet beneath this spiritual grandeur lies a city grappling with the daily realities of inequality, disputed sovereignty, and the absence of a lasting peace. Efforts to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have repeatedly stumbled on the question of Jerusalem's status. For many Palestinians, East Jerusalem is envisioned as the capital of a future state. For Israelis, the city in its entirety is non-negotiable. And for the international community, Jerusalem remains a symbol of what is possible and what is perilous when history, religion, and politics collide. Despite its long and turbulent past, Jerusalem continues to inspire, challenge, and endure. It teaches us that while walls may divide and ideologies may clash, the human spirit perseveres. In every generation, the city rises again, rebuilt, reimagined, and reaffirmed. Perhaps in this resilience lies the true legacy of Jerusalem, not just as a city of conflict, but as a living testament to the enduring hope of reconciliation and peace.